What is it about wilderness that so captivates us? There are so many things that we see in the Bible, in Scripture, about people going into the wilderness to have an amazing encounter with God or a transformation. One of my favorite stories regarding the wilderness has to do with 1 Kings 19. In this, we see the story of Elijah. This takes place just after the showdown on Mount Carmel, where the fire of God falls and consumes the sacrifice. They literally see the fire of God coming from the heavens. After that, it tells us that Elijah was afraid for his life. He fled and he traveled for 40 days to the mountain of God, to Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai. He found a cave there, and as he was hiding in that cave, the Bible tells us God was about to pass by. And it says when Elijah stood at the mouth of the cave, it says that there was a great wind that passed by and struck the mountain. But the Bible tells us that God was not in the wind. After the wind, there was a great earthquake that shook the rocks of the mountain. But God was not in the earthquake. And then we see after that, it tells us that after that, there was a great fire that struck the mountain. Now, of course, this has to be God showing up, right? If I was Elijah, that's exactly what I would be thinking. God had just shown up recently with the fire and the mountain, and so of course, God is an all-consuming fire, so this must be God, right? But the Bible also tells us that God was not in the fire. After the wind, after the earthquake, after the fire, the Bible then tells us that God showed up. And he showed up with the sound of a whisper on the wind, a still, small voice, if you will. Now, if I was Elijah, I might have been confused by that because I've seen the power of God. God has performed mighty, wondrous works, wondrous deeds, and I've seen his hand at work. And I hear God not show up in those ways, but in a simple, quiet, small voice in the wilderness. Now, thinking through that, I look at that person and I look at this whole story and I say that God, in this story, in this account, in this wilderness experience, that God is showing Elijah something brand new, something he's never seen about the character, about the nature of God. God was desiring to reveal himself to Elijah in a completely brand new way. And so what we see in this story, in this account, is that God was showing Elijah, I believe, that yes, I am the God of the wind. I am the God of the earth and the shaking. I am the God of the fire, but I am also the God of the still, small, and quiet. You know, so often in our lives, it's difficult to listen to the still, small, quiet voice of God. We are surrounded by technology, by emails, by news, by just the sound of life and the noise of life and the cacophony all around us. And so often it drowns out the simple, the still, the small, and the quiet. So coming to a place like a wilderness environment allows us to be quiet, to still our own hearts and our minds, and to listen to the voice of God. One thing I tell people and I encourage them on our river trips as we're going through the Grand Canyon, take a step back, just lay back and look up and see the majesty, see the power of God on display. Listen to the big, the wow, the grand, the mighty, but also take some quiet time and listen to the still, small, and quiet. As you're laying in your cot at night, look up and see the vast array of stars above, as those stars in those heavens declare the glory of God. Listen to God in the still, small, and quiet. Coming to a place like a wilderness helps us see and experience and understand that. It removes us from our comfort zone. It rips us out of our day-to-day lives, and it places us in an environment where we are left with nothing other than the voice of God. So many people throughout Scripture went to the wilderness places to have that encounter, to have that time with God. And I see in 1 Kings 19 that God was directing Elijah. God was sending Elijah to this wilderness, to this quiet place, saying, Elijah, I am the God of the grand, the powerful, and the mighty, but I'm also the God of the still, small, and quiet. And when you think you've got me figured out, you know nothing yet. That is the living God that we serve. A God who is grand, who is mighty, who is powerful, yet a God who desires to speak to our innermost beings. A God who desires to speak to the very depths of who we are. If only we will quiet our lives and listen. I challenge you, I encourage you today. Listen to the voice of God. Find a wilderness place, whether it's a literal wilderness like we have here at the Grand Canyon, or a wilderness, a quiet place that you create in your own home. Find that quiet place. Stop the noise of life and listen to the powerful yet simple voice of God as he speaks to you and through his word as he reveals himself to you. And let your life be changed and transformed as God does wondrous, mighty works in your life.